Good morning. Welcome into the program. 623-3865 is the phone number. Email inbox is rperdue@wvradio.com. Phone lines are open. Email inbox is open as well. We will take your calls and your emails. And this is the show I've been telling you about for a few days now. Be patient. Be open-minded. Listen to what we're talking about, and don't make assumptions. Joining me on the telephone this morning from literally the other side of the world, from Shanghai, is Edward Falzon. He's an author, and the title of his new book is Being Gay is Disgusting, or God Likes the Smell of Burning Fat, a modern-day paraphrasing of an otherwise uninteresting book. Basically, Edward, this amounts to a biblical parody. You know as well as I do, when you put out a title of a book like this, Being Gay is Disgusting, or God Likes the Smell of Burning Fat, the initial assumption is going to be, and I'm assuming that many people in our audience right now are saying, here we go again, it's another attack on religion, it's going to be another hour bashing the Bible. That's not necessarily the case. Tell us, first of all, about how you came up with the title of the book, and then we'll spend our first segment kind of talking about your motivation for writing the book, which amounts to a biblical parody.
Absolutely. Well, good morning to start with, and good morning to your listeners, or good evening, depending on whether they're where I am. My motivation behind the book title is simply because it's the flavor of the day. It's the thing that the conservative Christians latch onto from the Old Testament and kind of forget what's in the New Testament. They forget all the morality that their own Savior, that a Christian's own Savior talks about turning the other cheek and loving your neighbor and all of these things, and they'll just say, no, homosexuality is a sin. It says so in the Bible. They forget that Jesus never mentioned homosexuality. And they forget, of course, that homosexuality is mentioned twice in the books of Moses and perhaps 6 times throughout the entire Bible. Unicorns, in the King James Bible, unicorns are mentioned more often than homosexuality. In the 2,700 years in the books of Moses, it's mentioned twice, and the prohibition against boiling a goat in the milk of its own mother is mentioned 3 times. In fact, in one set of the 10 commandments, that's one of the commandments. So, people forget conveniently that homosexuality is barely mentioned, and then they'll go out of their way to pass laws. So the first is the irony that it's barely mentioned in the Bible, but it is the most referenced verse in the 21st century from the Bible across America.
Well, the other one is that... To be fair, Edward, unicorns can't serve openly in the American military either, just for fairness.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's not necessarily a prohibition in any legislation that says unicorns can't serve openly as mounted, like horses, for example, as mounted infantry or cavalry.
They got a built-in bayonet.
Unicorns are not prohibited technically. That's just presumed that they don't want to serve.
And they've got a built-in bayonet as well. So.
That's right. So they could even be better than horses,
Absolutely.
And this is why they're not prohibited. That's the irony, that it's barely mentioned, but the Bible might as well be called homosexuals should be outcast, or something to that effect, or being gay is disgusting, because that's what everybody is preaching nowadays. And they hide behind these lobbies, these conservative Christian lobbies, which, on the face of it, I don't have any particular objection to a conservative Christian lobby, but the only thing they're lobbying is gays shouldn't serve in the military and gays shouldn't get married to each other.
Right.
I don't understand that. And they hide behind words like family. It's like, well, okay, gay people have families. They come from families. And they say, think of the children, and they talk about Family Research Council and all of these other things, and it just has nothing to do with family whatsoever. So I don't like the hypocrisy.
That's the motivation behind the title. The book itself, as we said, is basically a biblical parody. You've gone through, you've reinterpreted the first 5 books of the Old Testament, so one can assume there will be future installments in this series. What was your motivation in rewriting and in kind of updating in modern phraseology and in very real and in sometimes harsh terms what it is the Bible actually says? What made you decide to sit down and find a way to rewrite the Bible?
Well, in my travels, I've been to 18 countries, and America, of course, is one of those countries, and I've been to America many, many, many times, and of course, the bulk of Christianity is in America now, particularly with the conservative Christianity movement. But all over the world, not just Christians, but primarily Christians, I've met have insisted that the Bible is true to at least some degree. Some, of course, say that it's literally true, and yet haven't read it. And the very, very few, and I'm talking about maybe 10% of the people who have read it, haven't studied the Bible really. They've sort of skimmed through it and then said, yes, tick that box, I've read the Bible. And then they go and focus just on the Gospels when there are, 66 books of the Bible, not 4.
One of the things I found, Edward, is that when you talk about the Bible and the contents, people know the most popular verses, the ones that kind of guide their lives and their moral code
Yes.
that they live by. But many, many, many people either don't know, don't acknowledge, ignore, or pass off as a misinterpretation some of the very nasty parts of the Bible.
Absolutely. And that's fine, provided you choose to use the Bible as a work of literature, as you would use the works of Shakespeare or Dickens. And you say, well, I agree with this morality, I don't agree with that morality. And I think I'm probably on a level with Dawkins in that respect. He quite likes the King James Bible, and he recently promoted or endorsed its 400th anniversary, much to the ire of many of his followers, because he just loves the English, and he loves it as a work of literature. And he can recite Song of Solomon, apparently. But the thing is that when it comes to morality, people don't even realize, and this is the other thing, and if you're skeptical or borderline atheist, or your agnostic listeners will have been accused of not knowing morality if they don't know the Bible. But the fact is that even the most conservative, fundamentalist Christian who knows the Bible back and forth still doesn't get their morality from the Bible. And I can demonstrate that very easily. The Ten Commandments, almost all of them, carry a death penalty for breaking them. But nobody thinks that you should be put to death for working on the Sabbath. And the book of Numbers has a specific example when God said, make this person an example, take him out of the camp, kill him for gathering firewood on the Sabbath, and make sure his family participate. And nobody thinks that should be the case. Nobody thinks that should be the case. It has never, ever been overturned by Jesus or anybody else. And yet, no one's lobbying for taking the Sabbath off. They're only lobbying for don't be gay, because that's in the Bible.
And there are also examples as well where you're supposed to stone your child for talking back to you, and that's never done as well.
Absolutely.
And one of the things
That's
one of the things we'll talk about later in the show is the Ten Commandments themselves. And what most people know as the Ten Commandments, as illustrated in your book, are not necessarily the actual Ten Commandments. We'll talk about that a little bit later on the program, and we'll go through some of your favorite passages in the book. I want to talk a little bit more about the book itself before our first commercial break. One of the things I admire about it, and let me tell our listeners as well, there's a website, beinggayisdisgusting.com. I encourage you to go to that website and take a look through it. And quite honestly, Edward, I think the book and I think the website are both genius. But one of the things that I tremendously respect about you is, this is your interpretation of the Bible, but you are open to be corrected. You've got a challenge on your website. If someone can show that you have misinterpreted the meaning of the Bible, you're quite open to being corrected, and they can submit that right there on the website.
Absolutely. If I've done something wrong, if I've I won't say interpreted, I don't really like that phrase. I prefer to use the word paraphrase, simply because I haven't added my own morality to it. I haven't changed it according to what I think should be right. I've simply paraphrased to make it a bit more accessible. But yes, if I've misparaphrased, I absolutely hope somebody will correct me. As a matter of fact, the first few hundred that I printed for the launch early last year in March had a mistake. And so I actually threw them out, rewrote that paragraph, and then reprinted. I don't want to be accused of A, being closed-minded, or B, doing it wrong.
Right.
So yes.
What is the most the criticism that you hear most often when people talk about your book? Because obviously the first thing people would want to say is, as we've already discussed, you're attacking my religion, you're attacking my Bible, you're taking things out of context. What criticism do you hear most often when you're discussing your book?
Well, I do get a lot of the whole you're attacking religion. One particular non-fan likes to remind me that there are so many other religions out there that I should be attacking instead of Christianity. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, it doesn't make any sense. I mean, there are plenty of people not attacking, but criticizing various things across the world. I was told that I should be criticizing nationalism instead of religion, and maybe I should. But, pick your battles. The thing is that my issue is not that Christianity is necessarily wrong or it's flawed or anything like that. My issue is that there are so many people who haven't read the owner's manual of their own faith.
It is,
and that deliberate ignorance I would like to fix. And when I started reading the Bible, I understood why people haven't read the Bible. It is so hard to read.
You're right. It's very difficult to read. There are areas that are, and we hear this so often, well, that's being misinterpreted. These people have interpreted it this way. There are so many different rewrites of it. And I think one of your motivations for doing this is to kind of put in no uncertain terms what the Bible is trying to say. Because really, when you say something is mistranslated or misinterpreted, then that would imply that one version is correct and another version has been interpreted or translated differently. And part of the discussion is, well, which version is correct? Which version is the actual interpretation? And all you've tried to do really with this book, not an attack on the Bible, but a very up-to-date, very modern retranslation of what's being written there.
Absolutely. Just for ease of reading, basically. I'm not trying to reinterpret. I'm not even criticizing it throughout. I make a lot of sarcastic comments at my attempt at humor. I'm not trying to criticize or critique or cross-reference, inconsistencies or anything like that. The purpose of the book is merely for people to be able to read the Bible in a more entertaining way than King James or the Message or any of the others.
Right. And you have to be able to understand, you have to admire and respect parody, and you cannot be too oversensitive. This is something I've said many, many times, especially when it comes to a religious discussion. If you are overly sensitive, this book is not for you. If you're someone who enjoys Monty Python's The Life of Brian and gets the sarcasm there and gets the parody, this book is every bit for you. You do have to have a bit of a sense of humor, and you have to approach this thing from a parody perspective and not from the personal perspective that it's an attack on your personal belief system. We will take phone calls. I want to talk about some of the chapters, get to some of the passages, and more, and I do encourage you to go to the website, beinggayisdisgusting.com. We'll come back with more with our guest, Edward Falzon, right after this on The Morning Edition.